She confessed her virginity in the elevator. The billionaire heard everything and canceled all his meetings. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us come back to our main character. The elevator door slid shut with a soft metallic sigh, sealing off the noise of the Manhattan morning. 30 floors up. That was what the digital screen said. 30 floors of quiet. She stood near the mirrored wall, one hand wrapped around her phone, the other gripping the strap of her work bag like it might anchor her to the ground. Her name was Emily Carter, and she was a secretary who arrived early every day, not because anyone asked her to, but because arriving late made her feel like she had already failed before the day began. She believed she was alone. The call connected, and her voice dropped to a whisper, not because the space demanded it, but because the words did. I did not tell him, she said softly. I could not. I froze. She paused, swallowing. I know it sounds stupid, but I am scared. I am 26 years old, and I have never been with anyone. I am still a virgin, and every time things get close, I panic. The word hung in the air longer than she expected. The elevator continued to rise. What Emily did not know was that she was not alone. Standing just a few feet away from her, near the control panel, was Daniel Roth, the billionaire founder and chief executive officer of Rothwell Industries. A man whose calendar was booked in 15-minute blocks, whose decisions moved stock prices, whose time was measured in millions of dollars per hour. He had stepped into the elevator at the last second, distracted by a message on his phone, and the doors had closed before either of them noticed each other. Now he stood completely still. Emily turned slightly, resting her forehead against the cool glass, her reflection staring back at her with wide, anxious eyes. I just want to be seen as more than something people expect to take, she continued. I wanted to mean something. I do not want to give myself away just to prove I am normal. Her friend murmured something on the other end of the line, but Emily barely heard it. I am tired of feeling broken, she said. I am tired of pretending I am not afraid. The elevator slowed. Daniel's phone vibrated in his hand. A reminder for a board meeting. Then another. And another. His assistant was already texting, asking where he was. He did not look at the screen. In his entire career, Daniel Roth had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without his pulse changing. He had fired executives without raising his voice. He had trained himself to move through life untouched, efficient, precise. But something about the quiet honesty in her voice stopped him cold. Not the word she used. Not the confession itself. It was the vulnerability. Emily lowered her phone, exhaling shakily, as if she had just stepped off a ledge. She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed even though she believed no one could see her. The elevator chimed. Daniel finally spoke. Excuse me, he said gently. Emily gasped, spinning around, her face draining of color when she realized someone had been there the entire time. I am so sorry, she blurted out. I did not know anyone else was here. I should not have said any of that. Please forget it. I was not talking to you. Daniel met her eyes. He did not look away. He did not smile. He did not judge. I am sorry, he replied quietly. I did not mean to overhear. The doors opened. People waited outside, unaware that something invisible had just shifted inside that small metal box. Daniel did not step out. Instead, he raised his phone, typed a single message, and sent it. Cancel all my meetings today. Emily hesitated, confused by his stillness, then hurried past him, her heart pounding as she walked into the hallway, unaware that her life had just brushed against a man who would never hear the world the same way again. And Daniel Roth remained in the elevator, standing alone, staring at the closing doors, wondering why, for the first time in years, power suddenly felt less important than listening. Emily spent the rest of the morning moving through the office like a ghost. She sat at her desk on the 32nd floor, answering emails, organizing files, smiling politely at coworkers, all while her mind replayed the same moment over and over again. The elevator, the voice, the realization that someone had heard her most private truth. She told herself it did not matter. People overheard things all the time in offices like this. Conversations slipped through walls. Secrets floated through hallways. This was New York. Everyone was too busy to care. Still, her hands shook slightly as she typed. Emily had learned early in life how to make herself small. She grew up in a quiet town in Ohio, where people noticed differences quickly and labeled them even faster. While her friends dated, experimented, and laughed about it, Emily stayed back. Not because she was naive or sheltered, but because something inside her always whispered, wait. Then came college. Then work. Then the city. At every stage, the world seemed to tell her the same thing in a different voice. You are behind. You are strange. You are doing it wrong. She never told anyone the full story. Not about the first time she trusted someone and felt her body freeze in fear. Not about how she learned that consent was not just about words, but about feeling safe enough to breathe. So she focused on what she could control. She became good at her job. Very good. Emily was the kind of secretary people depended on without noticing. She remembered birthdays. She caught scheduling conflicts before they exploded. She stayed late without being asked. Not because she wanted praise, but because being useful made her feel like she belonged. By noon, the rumors started. Did you hear the board meeting got canceled? All of them. That never happens. Emily kept her eyes on her screen. Her stomach tightened. Daniel Roth did not cancel meetings. He was known in the company as precise, disciplined, almost mechanical. People joked that if the building were on fire, he would finish his call before leaving. Yet the entire executive floor was suddenly quiet. Emily tried not to think about the possibility that it had anything to do with her. She failed. Across the building, in an office wrapped in glass and steel, Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the city he had conquered and suddenly felt disconnected from. His assistant hovered nearby, tablet in hand, clearly confused. Should I reschedule everything for tomorrow? She asked carefully. Daniel did not answer right away. He was thinking about the sound of Emily's voice. Not dramatic, not seductive, just honest, fragile, real. In his world, people wanted something from him at all times. Attention, money, influence, access. Even intimacy often came with expectation, pressure, performance. What he had heard in that elevator was none of those things. It was fear. It was choice. It was a woman asking, quietly, to be respected. Yes, Daniel finally said. Tomorrow is fine. His assistant nodded, still puzzled, but she did not ask more questions. No one ever did. Back at her desk, Emily stood to refill her coffee, hoping the movement would steady her nerves. As she turned the corner, she nearly collided with someone walking toward her. Daniel Roth. She froze. He stopped immediately, taking a step back as if giving her space. I am sorry, he said calmly. I did not mean to startle you. Her heart raced. No, it is my fault. I was not looking. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway felt too narrow, too quiet. I wanted to say, Daniel began, choosing his words with care, about earlier. I hope you did not feel exposed. I should have announced myself. Emily's cheeks flushed. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. It was my mistake, she said quickly. I should not have been talking like that at work. Daniel shook his head slightly. You did nothing wrong. She looked up then, surprised. He did not say anything more. He did not ask questions. He did not offer advice. He simply met her gaze with something unfamiliar to her in a man of his position. Respect. If you ever feel uncomfortable here, he added, you should know that your boundaries matter. Then he stepped aside, letting her pass. Emily walked away, her coffee forgotten, her chest tight with something she could not yet name. She did not know it then, but that brief exchange had planted the first seed of healing. Not because a billionaire had noticed her, but because for the first time in a long while, someone powerful had chosen to listen instead of take. And that choice was about to change everything. That evening, Emily stayed late. The office. Lights dimmed one row at a time as people packed up their bags and rushed back into the city, chasing dinners, trains, and lives that seemed to move faster than hers. She waited until most of the floor was empty before shutting down her computer, not because she had to, but because quiet made it easier to think. Or harder. She was not sure anymore. She kept replaying Daniel's words in her mind. You did nothing wrong. No one had ever said that to her so simply before. Not about this part of her. Not without conditions. As she walked toward the elevators, her phone buzzed. A message from her friend, the same one she had been speaking to earlier. Did you make it through the day okay? Emily paused, then typed back. I think so. Something strange happened. She did not explain further. She was not ready. The elevator arrived. Empty. She stepped inside and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly as the doors closed. This time, she was truly alone. Or so she thought. On the 25th floor, the doors opened again. Daniel Roth stepped in. Emily's breath caught for just a second before she reminded herself to stay calm. This was a building with dozens of floors. They worked in the same place. Coincidences happened. He nodded politely, keeping his distance, his posture relaxed. Long day, he asked. Yes, Emily replied honestly, but a manageable one. The elevator resumed its descent. The hum of the cables filled the silence. Daniel studied the floor numbers, not her reflection. He did not want to make her uncomfortable. That mattered to him more than he expected. I wanted to ask you something, he said after a moment. And you are free to say no. Emily glanced at him, surprised by the phrasing. Okay, she said cautiously. Would you be willing to walk with me to the lobby? He continued. I find that days like this feel lighter when they end with conversation. She hesitated, not because she felt unsafe, but because she was unused to being asked so gently. Yes, she said. The doors opened, spilling them into the marble lobby where the city pressed against the glass walls, glowing with evening traffic and endless motion. They walked side by side, not too close, not too far. Daniel did not start with questions about her past or her choices. Instead, he asked simple things. How long she had been in New York, what she liked to do when she was not working, whether she preferred the city in the morning or at night. Emily answered carefully at first, then more easily as she realized he was listening without interruption. I like the city early, she said, before it feels like it is demanding something from me. He smiled at that. I know exactly what you mean. They stepped outside, the cool air wrapping around them. The street was busy, but somehow the space between them felt calm. May I be honest? Daniel asked. Emily nodded. When I heard you earlier today, I realized something uncomfortable about myself, he said. I have spent years confusing access with connection. I did not even notice I was doing it. She did not respond right away. She did not feel pressured to. I do not want to be that man anymore, he continued. The one who takes without listening. Emily looked at him, really looked at him. Not the billionaire. Not the title. Just the man standing in front of her, choosing his words with care. That means more than you think, she said softly. They reached the corner where their paths separated. Emily slowed, unsure why she felt reluctant to leave. I appreciate you saying that, she added. Most people would have pretended nothing happened. Daniel nodded. Pretending is easy. Staying present is not. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Good night, Emily, he said. Good night, Daniel. She watched him walk away, his figure blending into the crowd, and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not excitement. Not desire. Relief. For the first time in years, she did not feel like she was carrying her truth alone. Across the street, Daniel stopped and turned back, just once, watching her disappear into the subway entrance. He did not follow. He did not reach out. He simply let the moment be what it was. And in that quiet restraint, something inside both of them began, slowly, to heal. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Emily did not expect. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand gestures. No sudden confessions. And somehow, that made everything feel more real. Daniel did not seek her out constantly. He did not linger near her desk or invent reasons to call her into his office. Instead, he changed the environment around her in ways so subtle that most people never noticed. Meetings started on time and ended early. Conversations stayed professional. Late-night emails became rare. When someone spoke over Emily in a discussion, Daniel calmly redirected the room. Let her finish, he would say, without raising his voice. Each time it happened, Emily felt something inside her loosen, just a little. She began to notice how carefully he watched the space between people, how he never stood too close, how he waited for permission, not just in words, but in silence. It was not flirtation. It was consideration. For Emily, that consideration felt unfamiliar. She had spent so long guarding herself that she forgot what it felt like to lower her shoulders, to breathe without bracing for impact. Around Daniel, she did not feel observed. She felt seen. One evening, as rain streaked down the office windows, Daniel approached her desk near closing time. I am heading out, he said. Would you like to join me for a walk? No expectations. Just air. Emily looked at the clock, then at him. Yes, she said after a moment. I would. They walked slowly through the city, umbrellas barely keeping up with the drizzle. The sidewalks glistened under streetlights, reflecting a version of New York that felt softer, quieter. Daniel spoke first. I have been thinking about something you said, he admitted. About wanting it to mean something. Emily nodded. It took me a long time to even say that out loud. I believe intimacy should begin with trust, he said. Not pressure. Not entitlement. She stopped walking, surprised. Most men, when they spoke about intimacy, spoke as if it were something owed, something earned through time or effort. Daniel spoke as if it were a gift, freely given or not at all. That belief is rare, Emily said. So is courage, he replied. And what you did took courage. They resumed walking, their steps naturally matching pace. Emily found herself opening up without planning to. I used to think there was something wrong with me, she said quietly. Everyone else seemed so certain. So unafraid. And now? Daniel asked. Now I think maybe I was just waiting to feel safe, she answered. He did not interrupt. He did not try to fix the sentence or turn it into something else. He simply let it exist. That night, when Emily returned to her apartment, she slept more deeply than she had in years. For Daniel, the change was just as unsettling. He found himself questioning habits he had never challenged before. The way he filled silence with control. The way he avoided vulnerability by staying busy. The way he believed success had to come at the cost of connection. Listening to Emily had forced him to slow down. And in that stillness, he began to feel things he had buried long ago. Loneliness. Regret. A quiet longing to be known without performing. One afternoon, during a meeting with senior executives, a discussion turned sharp. Voices rose. Egos clashed. Daniel listened, then closed his folder. We are done for today, he said. The room fell silent. Later, his assistant approached him. You have been different lately, she observed. Calmer. Daniel considered that. I am learning that strength does not come from control, he said. It comes from restraint. Back at her desk, Emily received a message from Daniel. If you are free later, I would like to continue our conversation from yesterday. No pressure. She smiled softly before typing back. I would like that. What neither of them realized yet was that these small, deliberate moments were doing something far more powerful than attraction ever could. They were rebuilding trust. Not just between two people, but within themselves. And that kind of healing did not rush. It waited. The shift was subtle at first, almost easy to miss. Emily did not wake up one morning suddenly fearless or transformed. Healing did not arrive like a switch being flipped. It arrived like light through a window that had been closed for too long. Slow, careful, honest. She began to notice small changes in herself. She stopped bracing her shoulders when Daniel walked by. She no longer rehearsed conversations in her head before speaking to him. Silence between them no longer felt dangerous. It felt shared. One afternoon, they found themselves in the building cafeteria, standing side by side in line. The space was crowded, loud with overlapping conversations and clinking trays. Emily normally avoided places like this. Too much noise made her feel exposed. Daniel noticed. Would you prefer somewhere quieter? He asked softly. She nodded, surprised by how quickly the answer came. They took their coffee to a small outdoor terrace tucked between buildings, where the city noise softened into a distant hum. The air smelled faintly of rain and concrete. Emily wrapped her hands around her cup, warming her fingers. There is something I have been meaning to say, she began, her voice steady but thoughtful. I am not used to being asked what I need. Most people decide for me. Daniel listened, his attention complete. I have spent a long time thinking that if I did not give people what they wanted, they would leave, she continued. So I learned how to disappear instead. He felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. You should never have had to do that, he said quietly. She met his eyes. What scares me, Emily admitted, is not closeness. It is losing myself inside someone else's expectations. Daniel took a slow breath. Then let us agree on something, he said. If at any point you feel like you are shrinking, you say so, and I will listen. She smiled, a real one this time. That promise stayed with her. Days later, during a late afternoon walk through a nearby park, Emily surprised herself again. I want you to know, she said, stopping near a bench beneath a maple tree, that I do not feel pressured around you. That is new for me. Daniel did not react immediately. He did not reach for her hand or step closer. Thank you for trusting me with that, he replied. For Emily, That response mattered more than any declaration could have. She began to talk more openly. About her childhood. About the night she realized her boundaries had been crossed even though no one else would have called it harm. About how she learned to associate intimacy with obligation. Daniel did not interrupt. He did not minimize. He did not say it could have been worse. He said, "I am sorry that happened to you." And in that moment, something shifted inside her. Not because he was a billionaire. Not because he was powerful. But because he was present. For Daniel, her openness challenged him in ways no boardroom ever had. He had always believed intimacy was something to manage, to control, to schedule between obligations. With Emily, he was learning that intimacy began long before touch. It began with patience, with restraint, with choosing not to take. One evening, as they walked back toward the office after dinner, Emily stopped near the entrance. "I am not ready for certain things," she said gently, not looking at him. "I do not know when I will be." Daniel nodded without hesitation. "That does not scare me," he said. "We move at your pace. Or we do not move at all." She turned to him then, eyes bright with emotion she did not rush to hide. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood there, close but not touching, the city flowing around them. For the first time, Emily did not feel like she was withholding something. She felt like she was choosing herself. And for the first time, Daniel realized that love did not need urgency to be real. Sometimes, the most powerful signal of connection was the decision to wait. And in that waiting, both of them were beginning to feel whole. The first sign of trouble did not come from Daniel. It came from the office. Emily noticed the shift in tone before she heard the words. Conversation stopped when she approached. Laughter softened into whispers. Eyes lingered just a second too long. At first, she told herself she was imagining it. But then the comments began. "Must be nice to have special access. She spends a lot of time with him, does not she?" Emily kept her head down, her work flawless as always, but the weight of the unspoken grew heavier each day. She had spent her entire career proving she belonged here. Now, with a single rumor, that belonging felt fragile. One afternoon, a colleague pulled her aside near the break room. "I am just trying to warn you," the woman said quietly. "People are talking. They think you are getting preferential treatment." Emily felt her chest tighten. "I have never asked for anything," she replied. "I believe you," the colleague said. "But not everyone does." That night, Emily lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling as the city hummed below her window. Old fears crept back in, familiar and sharp. This is what happens when you are seen. This is what it costs. The next morning, she requested a meeting with Human Resources. When Daniel heard about it, he felt something twist inside him. He had known this moment would come. Power always attracted scrutiny, and anyone standing too close to it risked being burned. Emily sat across from the Human Resources director, hands folded in her lap, posture straight. "I want to formally request a transfer to another department," she said calmly. "I do not want my presence to cause disruption." The director raised an eyebrow. "Is this your choice?" "Yes," Emily answered, even though the word tasted bitter. Later that day, Daniel asked Emily to meet him in his office. She hesitated before stepping inside. The space was large, polished, intimidating in ways she usually avoided. He noticed immediately. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair but remaining standing himself. "I heard about your transfer request," he continued. Emily nodded, keeping her gaze steady. "I do not want to be a liability," she said. "I work too hard to be reduced to gossip." Daniel leaned against his desk, his expression thoughtful, not defensive. "I would never allow anyone to diminish your work," he said. "But I understand why you feel exposed." She took a breath. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Emily admitted. "The moment someone thinks my value comes from proximity instead of merit, I disappear again." Daniel felt the full weight of her words. This was the true test, not of his feelings, but of his character. He could stay silent, let the rumors pass, protect his image. Many men in his position would. But healing demanded more than restraint. It demanded action. "I will not let this be handled quietly," Daniel said finally. "And I will not ask you to carry this alone." Emily looked up, surprised. "Daniel, I do not want special treatment." "This is not special treatment," he replied. "This is accountability." The following week, during a scheduled executive meeting, Daniel addressed the room directly. "I am aware there have been inappropriate assumptions made about professional relationships within this company," he said evenly. "Let me be clear. Emily Carter has earned every position she holds through competence and integrity. Any suggestion otherwise reflects bias, not truth. The room was silent. Respect is not optional here, Daniel continued, and boundaries will be honored. For Emily, hearing those words felt both terrifying and relieving. After the meeting, she found Daniel standing alone in the hallway. "You did not have to do that," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. "I did." The fallout was immediate. Some people apologized. Others avoided her entirely. The office shifted again, but this time, Emily did not shrink. Still, the experience shook her. One evening, she met Daniel outside the building. "I need some time," she said honestly. "Not away from you, but to understand who I am becoming in all of this." Daniel nodded, his voice steady. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I am not going anywhere." As Emily walked away, she felt both exposed and stronger than she had ever been. The world had tested her healing, and this time, she did not break. Time did not rush back into place after that. Emily took a step back, just as she said she would. Not in distance measured by miles or silence, but in intention. She stopped staying late. She spent her evenings walking the city alone, letting her thoughts catch up with her body. For the first time, she was not running from fear. She was sitting with it. Daniel respected that space completely. He did not text her late at night. He did not look for excuses to cross her path. When they did see each other in the office, their exchanges were calm, grounded, unchanged by the tension others expected. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Daniel had asked his compliance team to quietly review recent internal communications. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted clarity. Healing, he had learned, required truth. What they found unsettled him. Several senior managers had been circulating emails with inappropriate language, not only about Emily, but about other women in the company. Patterns, assumptions, jokes disguised as culture. Emily had not been the cause. She had been the catalyst. Daniel called an emergency executive session. The room filled quickly, tension thick in the air. No one knew what was coming, but everyone felt it. Daniel stood at the head of the table, hands resting calmly on the surface. "I did not build this company to tolerate quiet harm," he began. "And I will not protect comfort over integrity." He spoke clearly, slowly, every word measured. He addressed the emails, the culture, the way power had been used to excuse behavior that made others feel small. "This is not about one person," Daniel said. "It is about who we choose to be when no one thinks they are listening." Some faces paled. Others looked down. There were consequences. Formal warnings. Mandatory training. 2 resignations before the week was over. For the first time since she joined the company, Emily felt the air change. Not because she had been defended, but because the system itself had shifted. When Daniel told her what had happened, he did not frame it as something he had done for her. "I did it because it was wrong," he said simply. "And because you helped me see it." Emily absorbed that quietly. "You did not fix me," she replied. "You fixed the space around me. That matters." That night, she invited him to walk with her. They met near the river, the city lights stretching across the water like scattered stars. The noise felt distant here, the world slower. "I was afraid to come back to myself," Emily admitted as they leaned against the railing. "I thought if I stood too firmly, I would lose connection." "And now?" Daniel asked. "Now I realize that the right connection does not require me to disappear," she said. He nodded. "I used to believe leadership meant control," Daniel said. "Now I think it means listening long enough to be changed." Emily turned toward him, studying his face. "I am not healed," she said honestly. "But I am healing." "That is all anyone can ask," he replied. They stood in silence, the kind that did not ask to be filled. For the first time, Emily felt something new take root beneath her ribs. Not fear, not anticipation, trust, not in him alone, but in herself. She reached out then, slowly, deliberately, and placed her hand over his. Daniel did not move. He let her decide. When she felt his fingers gently close around hers, it was not possession. It was agreement. 2 people choosing the same moment. The city kept moving. The river kept flowing. And between them, something quiet and strong held. Not the rush of romance, but the steady presence of healing that had finally found solid ground. Healing did not announce itself. It showed up quietly, in the way Emily began to move through the world without flinching. Weeks passed. The office found a new rhythm. The whispers faded, replaced by something steadier. Emily returned fully to her role, not as someone protected, but as someone respected. Her work spoke clearly now, unshadowed by doubt. Daniel kept his word. He did not rush her. He did not redefine their connection for her. He let it unfold at the pace she set. One evening, Emily invited him to her apartment for the first time. It was small. One bedroom. A narrow kitchen. A couch that had seen better days. But it was hers. Every object placed with intention. Every corner earned. Daniel noticed the details. The worn paperback books. The framed photograph of her mother on the windowsill. The quiet order of a life built carefully, not extravagantly. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said as she poured them tea. Emily nodded. "This space holds my truth. I do not bring many people here." They sat across from each other, the city lights filtering through the curtains, the room wrapped in calm. "There is something I need to say," Emily began. Her voice was steady, but deliberate. "Not because you are waiting, but because I am ready to speak it." Daniel leaned back slightly, giving her room. "I have spent years protecting myself by holding parts of me back," she continued. "Not because they were wrong, but because the world did not feel safe enough to hold them." She met his eyes. "With you, I do not feel taken from. I feel met." Daniel felt his chest tighten, but he did not interrupt. "I am choosing this," Emily said. "Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of clarity." She stood, crossing the small distance between them, stopping just short. "This is me stepping forward," she said softly. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I want to." Daniel rose slowly, careful not to close the space she still controlled. "Thank you for choosing me," he replied. "And thank you for choosing yourself." Emily reached for his hand, guiding it gently, deliberately. Her touch was calm, intentional, free of hesitation. When she leaned in, the kiss was unhurried. No urgency, no demand, just presence. For Emily, it felt different than anything before. Not because it was new, but because it was safe. She did not disappear inside the moment. She remained fully herself, aware, grounded, whole. Daniel followed her lead entirely, matching her pace, honoring every pause. He did not confuse closeness with possession. He understood now that intimacy was not something to claim, but something to be invited into. Later, they sat together on the couch, silence resting comfortably between them. "I used to think healing meant becoming someone else," Emily said quietly. "Stronger, less, afraid. And now?" Daniel asked. "Now I know it means becoming more myself," she replied. Daniel smiled. "You already were enough." Emily rested her head against his shoulder, not as surrender, but as choice. Outside, the city continued its restless motion. Inside, something had settled. This was not the end of her healing, but it was the moment she realized she no longer had to heal alone. And for Daniel, it was the moment he understood that love was not found in grand gestures or control, but in patience, respect, and the courage to wait until someone chose him freely. Together, they sat in the quiet, not rushing toward the future, letting it come, one honest moment at a time. The morning light filtered softly through the windows of Emily's apartment, slower than the city outside. There was no rush, no alarms, just the quiet certainty of a new beginning that did not demand explanation. Emily stood by the window, holding a mug of coffee, watching people move along the sidewalk below. For the first time in a long while, her chest felt steady. Not guarded, not braced, just calm. Daniel joined her, keeping a respectful distance even now, even after everything they had shared. "You seem lighter," he said gently. "I feel lighter," Emily replied. "Not because everything is perfect, but because I am no longer fighting myself." That was what healing had given her. Not a rewritten past, but a grounded present. In the weeks that followed, their lives did not transform overnight. Daniel did not pull her into a world of excess. Emily did not disappear into his shadow. They built something quieter and far more deliberate. They learned each other in ordinary moments. Grocery shopping on Sunday mornings. Walking the river at dusk. Sitting in silence without filling it with fear. Emily remained at the company, her work stronger than ever, her voice no longer hesitant in meetings. People noticed the change, not because of who she stood beside, but because of how she stood on her own. Daniel watched her grow with admiration, never mistaking her healing for something he had caused. He knew better now. He had not saved her. She had saved herself. One evening, months later, Daniel asked Emily to meet him on the rooftop of the building where it had all begun. The city stretched endlessly around them, lights flickering like constellations. "I want to ask you something," Daniel said, his voice steady but sincere. "And as always, you are free to say no." Emily smiled softly. "I know." He took a breath. "Will you walk forward with me?" he asked. "Not as someone who needs protection, and not as someone who owes me anything, but as an equal, as a choice we make every day." Emily felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear, but from recognition. "Yes," she said. "I choose that." He did not kneel. There was no spectacle, just a simple ring he held out, not as a claim, but as an invitation. Emily accepted it with a quiet laugh through tears. Their wedding, months later, was small. No press, no grand announcements, just close friends, open air, and vows spoken slowly, intentionally. When Emily spoke, her voice did not tremble. "I promise to honor myself," she said, "and to walk beside you without losing who I am." Daniel answered in kind. "I promise to listen," he said, "even when it is uncomfortable, especially then." As they stood together, hands linked, Emily realized something profound. She had not given up anything to love him. She had gained herself. And Daniel, standing beside her, understood at last that true success had never been about power or control. It had been about becoming the kind of man who could be trusted with someone else's truth. The elevator where it all began still moved up and down every day, carrying strangers and secrets alike. But for Emily and Daniel, it would always be the place where two lives paused long enough to listen. And in that pause, found healing and love.